Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor. And for 36 years in the classroom, I tried to bring history to life by dressing the part and immersing my kids in the culture of whatever time period we were studying. Well, what I'm doing now is I'm on a very pretentious sounding mission Odyssey where I intend to visit each of the sites of Alta California, each of the missions, the asistencias, those are the spin-off missions, the estancias, those are the ranchos that supported the missions, each of the presidios that guarded the missions, and any other sites that happened to catch my attention. And I plan to do it in garb and document the experience and tell the story of these different places. And what I'm doing today is I am on my way back to Mission La Purísima, so this will be the third time there, to tell the story of the mission, and primarily to talk about the Chumash Revolt of 1824, the secularization that happened and the restoration of this particular mission, because it is the best restored of all 21 of the missions. So I still have this passion for bringing the past to life. I have a house full of garb. I have a desire to preserve landmarks. And all this is coming together as part of a personal project and maybe a personal pilgrimage. So there we go to Mission La Purísima. I hope you will stick with me on the journey. Okay, I've talked before about the Chumash Revolt, but this is a hotbed here. This is Mission La Purísima, and this is going to be the site of a battle. And with the origins of the Chumash Revolt, Mexico had declared its independence from Spain, or at least had been fighting for it since 1810. That meant the Spanish were not sending supplies up to Alta California, and the soldados were not getting paid, and there was a lot of tension that was growing out of this. Well, now here's Mexico independent in 1821. Well, there's still a lot of tension, and the soldados have been having the neophytes at the different missions basically put in overtime without getting paid, and working them really hard and taking out their frustrations on the neophytes. Well, the Chumash Revolt of 1824 is getting planned months in advance, but it gets launched a day early because over at Mission Santa Ynez, a young boy who was a neophyte from La Purísima went over to visit a relative who was locked up, and this led to an altercation with a soldado named Valentin Cota, who severely whipped the boy, and that threw a spark into the powder keg, and the revolt took off. And it was happening at Santa Ynez, and it was happening at Santa Barbara, and it was happening here. Well, when it was happening here, there's going to end up being like 1,000 Chumash that'll end up being here, and a bunch will run off to the hills or make it over to San Luis Obispo, where they would be taken in and fed. Well, this is all exploding. There's 1,000 Chumash here, and this is partially the creation of the Spanish and the Mexicans, they didn't quite think through some things that they were doing. Hey, they taught architectural skills to the neophytes. Well, okay. This is one long, skinny mission. It's sometimes called the linear mission, but the reason it was built this way, it wasn't built in a quadrangle like all the other missions, was because of the earthquake in 1812. So they built it this way. They didn't think that, it would cause as much problems as far as earthquakes. It's harder to defend. Well, there was a carpenter who was a neophyte who came up from Santa Barbara, and he helped solve this problem. And the Chumash erected barricades, they erected stockades, they created loopholes for weapons. Oh, and there's another problem. There's a similarity with what happened in British India. In British India, okay, the British are looking around and they realize there ain't a whole lot of us, and there's a whole lot of Indians. We better solve this problem. In the mid-18th century, Britain gained control of India and began to spread its version of civilization. In order to do this, however, Britain needed to have more soldiers in place, and there weren't enough British soldiers for the task. So sepoys were hired. Sepoys were local troops. The problem was their customs were being disrespected, and what ended up happening is the sepoys rose up in bloody revolt, and this is known by many as the Sepoy Mutiny. Britain defeated the sepoys eventually, but only just barely. And this kind of is similar to the threat that Hippolyte Bouchard showed by, he attacked Monterey, the capital of Alta California, and burned the Presidio to the ground. That was a threat. So here's that similarity with what the British ended up doing. When the pirate Hippolyte Bouchard was coming down the coast, he had already burned the Presidio in Monterey in 1818. The missions went into panic mode, and it was decided, hey, there's only about 3,000 soldados in all of Alta California. We need to train some of the neophytes and make them, ready to be militias when we need them. So now, not only has La Purísima been fortified, the Chumash have also had military training in Spanish tactics and Mexican tactics, so they know how to fight this. And they had, in addition to their weapons that they had used for hunting, they are also equipped with 16 muskets, there are 6 cutlasses, there are 150 lances, there were 2 cannons. So the Spanish or the Mexican forces are facing a bit of a problem. So when the revolt actually began, the Chumash allowed the soldados, the 6 soldados that were assigned here, and their families to leave unharmed. They also allowed one of the padres to leave, and he went over to Santa Ynez, which, their revolt only lasted like a week. But there was another padre, Padre Antonio Catarino Rodriguez. He was in really bad shape. He was suffering from congestive heart failure, and the Chumash really liked him, so they let him stay, and they basically carried him around wherever he needed to go, and they saw to his needs. The Chumash are going to hold out here a month. Actually, the revolt starts like early February, and by March 16th it's going to be over, because what's going to happen is, okay, the Presidio in Santa Barbara is dealing with its own problems, but there's going to be 107 soldados marching from the Presidio at Monterey under the command of a Lieutenant Estrada, and they're going to envelop this place. They are also bringing artillery, and the Chumash they have these cannons. They're basically used for ceremonial purposes, for like celebration days. They're not really good shots with it, but that's got to be really scary. Well, the Spanish end up facing off with the cannons, and their cannon fire is much more effective. They had also sent a wing of cavalry around the back to cut off escape, and what ended up happening is the Chumash ended up surrendering. So the Battle of La Purísima took about 2.5, 3 hours. And I believe there were 16 Chumash dead. And the governor really wants to punish the Chumash, because this was a really scary revolt. Okay? Wants to punish the Chumash, and then it's going to be settled for, he's going to punish the ringleaders, and I think 7 of them were executed, and others were sentenced to hard labor, I believe over at the Santa Barbara Presidio. And things were never quite the same after that. La Purísima operated for another decade after the revolt, until Mexico secularized the California missions. The plan was the missions were to become pueblos, with the neophytes receiving land, livestock, seeds, and implements to establish their own ranches. They'd continue to operate and manage the shops, cellars, and storehouses under the direction of a leader selected by them. Instead, the governor appointed an administrator. When Domingo Carrillo assumed control of the La Purísima property as civil commissioner, the last missionary left the mission, and he went over to Santa Ynez. The neophytes were not free to engage in activities beneficial to themselves. Instead, they had to fill government orders for grains, blankets, saddles, shoes, and the needs of the soldiers and their families. By 1843, most of the Chumash had left La Purísima. And in 1845, Pio Pico, the last governor of Mexican California, sold La Purísima at auction. In 1874, the United States government returned La Purísima to the Catholic Church, but everything was in ruins, and the land was sold ultimately to the Union Oil Company, who donated it to the public in 1933. In the mid-1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps restored La Purísima, making bricks, floor, and roof tiles by hand, incorporating old walls that could be preserved. When this was done, they did the same thing to the garden, planting a lot of the plants that would have been there in mission times. So far, here's the count. 6 assistencias out of the way, or remnants of them, or markers. A couple of estancias. We also have 2 of the presidios out of the way. Few old mission dams. And 9 missions accomplished. Next up, Mission San Luis Obispo. I hope you stick with me.